They put my brother in charge of the business and told me, "You're just labor." I stopped my 70-hour weeks. But when their biggest supplier left, they had no choice but to call me. There's nothing quite like busting out 70-hour weeks for a business that carries your family's name, only to still get treated like the guy whose job is making sure the vending machine doesn't run out of chips. I came into this world tied to Harper & Sons, a family-owned fabrication shop in Ohio that my granddad started with little more than a beat-up drill press, a couple of missing fingers, and more stubborn grit than sense. It was the real-deal blue-collar legacy, the kind of place where a vacation meant you only had to clock in until noon on Saturday. By the time I was 17, I was welding, unloading shipments, keeping track of inventory, and patching up the busted forklift. My parents used to tell me I had the right hands for the work, which was their coded way of saying they'd bleed me dry while tossing me pocket change. Meanwhile, my older brother Caleb was the opposite. The guy practically broke out in hives around dust, got nosebleeds if he tried to lift anything heavier than a folder, and the only tool he ever wielded confidently was a golf club, mainly for pictures he slapped on Instagram with captions like, "Grind now, shine later." But to my parents, he was the one with the so-called vision. He'd be the man to carry the company into the next era. Dad actually told him that at his high school graduation dinner. Me? I'd keep things running while Caleb grew the empire. Back then, I thought it meant we'd be partners, brains and brawn, two brothers building something together. Turns out, what it really meant was Caleb got the air-conditioned office, pretending to answer emails, while I stood outside under a welding mask sweating through 2 shirts a day, earning $18 an hour and maybe a lukewarm sports drink if I got lucky. The kicker? There wasn't even some dramatic reveal or family sit-down. One Tuesday, while I was reloading a pallet jack and dripping in grease, Dad called us into the office. Caleb had just come back from business school, a 2-year excuse to sip cocktails in Italy, and somehow graduate without knowing what a profit margin was. We sat under flickering fluorescent lights that buzzed like they could sense the storm coming, and Dad laid it out. Caleb would be taking over as operations lead. I asked if that meant just handling the office side, and Dad shook his head. "No, son, the whole company." Silence hit hard. Mom sipped her cinnamon tea and said like it was the most normal thing in the world, "Don't take it personally, sweetie. You're a natural with tools, really gifted. But Caleb has that big picture energy. That's what we need." Big picture energy? Dad leaned in and said, "Relax. Your labor. Stick to what you're good at." Labor. That word dug into me, echoing louder than the machines in the shop. My fists curled under the table, still smeared with oil, and I realized they didn't see me as anything more than a wrench with legs. When I told my best buddy Nate, he shook his head and said, "Man, if I were you, I'd vanish faster than my ex did when rent was due." Still, I gave it one last shot. I went straight to Caleb and told him we had to make decisions together, that the guys wouldn't respect him unless he actually learned the ropes. He gave me a pity pat on the back, like I was some loyal dog, and said, "Don't worry, bro, I'll CC you." 3 weeks later, he forgot to order tungsten rods. Then he slashed the supply budget because the numbers looked too high. Of course they were high. Caleb, we were busy. When one of our best welders asked for a day off, Caleb denied it, claiming it didn't line up with Q3 velocity. That welder quit. Then another, and another. I was scrambling to keep a sinking ship afloat while my parents brushed me off, saying I was just too emotional. When I raised the issue of constant turnover, Mom told me we needed harmony. Harmony. With a guy who couldn't tell a MIG weld from a TIG weld if it stomped on his designer loafers. Finally, after another 14-hour shift, capped with a voicemail from Caleb whining about the font on the new logo, I sat down in the break room, grabbed a napkin, and scribbled 2 words. I was finished. That was it. I went home, slept like the dead, and the next day I didn't show up. Then the day after that. No calls. No texts. Just silence. Until the 4th day, when Caleb rang me up, half nervous and half chuckling, asking if I was still mad and reminding me about some shipment deadline coming up. I just told him, "Ask labor," and hung up. For those first couple of days, I didn't stage some dramatic exit or post anything bitter online. I just let myself rest. Slept until the sun was already high in the sky. Cooked an actual breakfast instead of choking down gas station burritos and stale vending machine coffee. I hadn't realized how burned out I was until I felt the simple joy of not lacing up steel-toe boots. By the time Caleb called, though, I was already back in work mode, but this time, not for them. Within a few days, 3 former clients and even a supplier rep had reached out, asking if I'd struck out on my own. In this industry, word travels fast. The second I disappeared, the whole shop felt rudderless. Or in Caleb's case, like a yacht with no Wi-Fi. So I did what any guy with tools, experience, and years of underpaid sweat would do. I built my own shop, right in my buddy Nate's backyard. We poured a slab, cleaned up his old workspace, and turned it into a modest fabrication studio. Petty? Maybe. Satisfying? Definitely. Meanwhile, back at Harper & Sons, things were falling apart faster than I expected. Nate's cousin still worked there, and he kept sending me play-by-plays like it was a bad sitcom. Caleb tried to run payroll on Excel, crashed the system, botched 2 major orders, and even managed to email the wrong specs to a client. HR, from what I heard, had basically been reduced to a manila folder. I told myself I wasn't smiling at the updates, but if I'm honest, yeah, I cracked a grin. Then came the cherry on top. One of our biggest accounts, a specialty metals supplier who'd stuck with us through tariffs, inflation, and pandemic shipping nightmares, called me directly. His name was Dennis, a gruff old guy who always smelled of cigars and black coffee and treated me like a nephew. Eli, he barked. What the hell's happening over there? I played dumb, asked what he meant. He told me they'd sent some rookie to haggle pricing, and the kid didn't even know what anodized aluminum was. Caleb, I asked. That his name? Dennis grunted. Sounded like a guy who learned business off YouTube. I didn't say much. He sighed and said, Look, I liked your old man before he lost his damn mind, and I like you. If you ever go independent, call me first. All I said back was, noted. Within 2 weeks of me walking, the shop had lost 4 welders, a floor supervisor, and a couple of loyal clients. The real sting hit the following Monday when Caleb called again, this time with no bravado left. He tried to laugh it off, asked if I had a minute. I told him nope. He pressed on, asking if I knew where the 2019 supplier records were stored, or if I remembered the tolerance specs for the Parker job. I stayed silent until I finally said, Sounds like you need labor for that. Then I hung up. Best part? He didn't even call back. No apology, no olive branch, nothing. Just radio silence. Instead, they sent Mom. She showed up at Nate's garage carrying a tray of lasagna, using that syrupy, oh, honey, tone she always pulled out when she needed a ride after yelling at us. She looked around, taking in the socket sets, the tools, the project's mid-assembly, the new orders pinned up on the wall. Eli, she said softly, you always loved working with your hands. I didn't even look up. Is that lasagna a peace offering or a bribe? I asked. She gave a tight smile and said she just missed her boys getting along. Claimed we'd always been close. I actually laughed at that. Mom, the guy once told me I was basically a socket wrench with legs. We were never close. She tried again, said Dad hadn't meant it when he called me just labor. Sure he did, I said, finally meeting her eyes. And he was right. I was labor, but not anymore. She glanced around the garage again, realizing this wasn't some tantrum. It was a launch. Her voice lowered. Don't throw away family over a title. I crossed my arms and said, I didn't throw anything away. I told her flat out, you all handed me the scraps, and I just figured out how to weld those scraps into something better. She didn't argue after that. She just scooped up her lasagna, store-bought, I noticed, and slipped out without another word. Figures. 3 days later, after Mom's lasagna diplomacy fell flat, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. Hey Eli, this is Frank. Dennis passed me your number. You taking on independent work now? My stomach tightened. Frank ran one of the biggest regional materials outfits around, supplying most of the fabrication shops in the tri-state area. If he was reaching out to me, it meant Caleb had finally botched something big. I texted back, yeah, small jobs, private clients for now. 10 seconds later, he was calling. His voice carried that edge between panic and relief. Not to sound desperate, but I've got a client tearing their hair out over a bad batch of custom-cut sheets. Guess who sent the wrong gauge? Again. I nearly choked. Again? Yep, he said. Second time in 3 weeks. First they blamed us. Now they're blaming the client. I asked which client. He hesitated before answering. Midwest Transit. I froze. That was our crown jewel account. Correction, my crown jewel. I'd been the one nurturing that relationship for 6 years, adjusting specs every time their bus models changed, personally driving emergency orders through snowstorms, dropping off donuts every month because Larry in receiving had a soft spot for bear claws, and Caleb had just lost them. Frank kept talking. They've already canceled their next 3 orders. Said they're done with excuses. But they did say if you're independent, they'd work with you directly. That's when it hit me. I wasn't just out. I was free. Caleb hadn't just messed up paperwork. He dropped our biggest, most vital client. The very lifeline of the shop. I told Frank I'd get back to him in 24 hours and hung up, then just sat there staring at the floor like it might hand me an answer. Nate walked in, saw me frozen, and asked if my brain had crashed. They lost Midwest Transit, I whispered. He dropped his sandwich. Dude. That night, I opened a business account, ordered a box of cards, and filed the paperwork for Redline Fabrication LLC. It was a name I'd been saving in my phone for years, just in case. And apparently, just in case had finally arrived. Meanwhile, over at Harper & Sons, chaos had gotten its own cubicle. Jeff, one of the guys I used to supervise, texted me a photo of their office whiteboard. It was covered in frantic scribbles. Find new supplier ASAP. Revise SOP? Who is Larry, and why won't he call back? Then Jeff added, he asked me today what a bearing flange is. I quit Friday. I didn't blame him. When Friday rolled around, I got a call from Dad. No greeting, no small talk. Just, Eli, we're in a tight spot. I stayed quiet. He sighed. Midwest Transit said they'd reconsider if you handled the next batch personally. Still, I said nothing. He tried again. Look, I know you're upset, but we need to focus on solutions. That word, we. I leaned back and repeated it. Solutions. Right. Well, my solution was leaving. Yours was handing the keys to a guy who thinks tolerance specs are a political opinion. Dad snapped, don't be childish. There it was, the real him. You've made your point. Time to be the bigger man. Classic. Translation, eat dirt, smile, and pretend it's steak. I took a slow breath and said, I'll think about it. But if I step in, it'll be under my terms. He grunted something and hung up. An hour later, a group email popped up from the Harper & Sons account with the subject line, Urgent Midwest Transit Order Revival. Eli has led. And who was CC'd? Every single employee, including Caleb. And who hit reply all? Caleb. His message? Wait, is this a joke? We're crawling back to just labor now? Not a soul answered him. The thread went dead quiet. And in that silence, it finally clicked. They could tack operations manager onto Caleb's name as much as they wanted. Respect, trust, and the know-how to actually keep the wheels turning, those had always been mine. When I saw Caleb's just labor email, it all clicked. He wasn't angry about me stepping back in. He was furious because there was nothing he could do to stop it. For the first time in his life, he didn't have the upper hand. No title on the door or shiny office chair could save a crumbling business when the only guy who knew how to hold it together was already halfway through building something of his own. I didn't reply right away. I let it simmer. Let them stew in the awkward silence of that CC'd thread, the kind that makes people hover over the unsend button like it's a bomb trigger. The next morning, I sent a message straight to Dad. Subject line, Midwest Transit. Proposal. It read, if Harper & Sons wants me to handle the order, I'll need full control of materials, sourcing, and scheduling. Under my business, Redline Fabrication LLC. I'll work as a third-party contractor, not an employee. Terms attached. Rates are non-negotiable. Eli. At the top of the invoice, I added one little touch. Client, Harper & Sons Fabrication, subcontract request. A few hours later, the reply came. Not from Dad, not from Caleb, but from Cheryl the accountant. Understood. Processing now. Bless her. That was the moment I grinned. I wasn't coming back in at their level. I was coming in above them. When I pulled up to Midwest Transit that week, Larry was already waiting outside with a grin. Bare claws in the break room. Just for you. I laughed. You remembered. Of course. You kept our buses on the road during the salt shortage back in 21. I'd have named one after you if I could have. We walked the floor, went over the specs, and set the timeline. For the first time in years, it felt right again. Like being home, but not their home. Back at Harper & Sons, though, it was obvious they were scrambling. PR panic mode, full tilt. I even got a LinkedIn request from Caleb titled, "Open to Collaborating." I left that one sitting in limbo. Meanwhile, Nate and I kept scaling the garage slowly. Local projects, small machine shop contracts. But after landing Midwest Transit, we weren't just making side money. We had revenue, visibility, and the one thing they never gave me, leverage. 2 days before delivery, Dad called again. His voice was different this time, softer. "Eli," he said, "I read the invoice." "Good," I told him. "You didn't go easy on us," he admitted. "No," I said. "You didn't go easy on me either." He cleared his throat. "You've built something good here." That stopped me cold. A compliment from him was rarer than a quiet Christmas dinner in our house. "Thanks," I said. He hesitated. "Any chance you'd consider rejoining the company? Maybe bring some of your systems back, help restructure?" I let a long pause hang. Then I said, "You mean fix everything Caleb broke while you watched?" He didn't answer. "I'm not coming back," I continued. "But I'll take your orders, as a contractor." He grunted. "Even after everything, you're still willing to work with us?" "No," I said. "I'm willing to bill you." Silence. And in the background, I swear I heard Caleb yelling about something. Probably a jammed printer or a spreadsheet gone missing. Music to my ears. After hanging up, I updated the job board in our little garage. Fresh logo pinned up top. New contracts filling the calendar. Stickers slapped on the equipment. And right under my monitor, taped in place, was that old napkin with Dad's words in my handwriting. "You're just labor." I kept it there, not as a wound, but as fuel. Because sometimes the best way to thank someone for lighting a fire under you is to build your own forge. Redline fabrication was never supposed to be competition. It started with a single bench, a borrowed welder, and 2 guys grinding through night shifts on nothing but coffee and Taco Bell. Nate handled the scheduling and invoices. I handled the builds, the grind, and the clients who remembered I was the reason Harper & Sons ever got their orders out on time. But after Midwest Transit, it was clear this wasn't just a garage anymore. Redline had turned into a machine. Parts were rolling in every week, and Nate's cousin Cam, who was a wizard with CAD, signed on full-time. With him on board, we added 3D modeling to our services, something Harper & Sons never even dreamed of offering. And just like that, clients who used to be untouchable started drifting our way. Of course, it didn't take long for Caleb to notice. Jeff, the bearded Viking, told me Caleb had been running around the office shouting about how they needed to digitize their offerings because Redline was doing something weird with modeling. He thought it was AI. What he really meant was CAD, the same software they teach in trade schools. A week later, one of my clients forwarded me an email from Harper & Sons. "We're excited to offer premium express packages for your fabrication needs, featuring advanced prototype rendering and custom consultation." I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my phone. It was just a pile of buzzwords slapped together, like a toddler had gone wild with a thesaurus. And that so-called premium express package? Just a regular quote with a 15% markup and the word "fast" underlined 3 times. Real bleeding-edge stuff. The icing on the cake? They'd copied Redline's invoice template. Same font, same layout, same footer. Only problem, they forgot to delete the line that read, in bright red letters, "Redline Client Portal Login." It was like watching someone steal your jacket, but leave your name tag pinned on the front. I didn't react, didn't call them out, just kept building. Quietly, Nate and I put together Redline's first satellite crew. We found a commercial lot outside Dayton, an old detailing shop with perfect ventilation and a sturdy loading dock. Signed the lease in cash. 3 days later, Larry from Midwest Transit called me again. "Eli, you got a minute?" "Always." "You ever heard of the statewide expo in Cincy? The industrial showcase?" "Sure," I said. "We used to go every year." He chuckled. "Well, Harper & Sons just pulled out. Claimed budget cuts. But here's the kicker. They told us to check out Redline's booth instead. Said you've got something newer." I nearly dropped the phone. "They're referring you to me now?" Guess they finally figured out which son actually does the work. By the time the expo came, Redline rolled in with a custom booth, a CNC demo monitor, live part rendering, and Nate holding down the display like he'd been born to pitch startups. We didn't even have to sell. People came straight to us. Suppliers, transit managers, city planners. Folks who hadn't returned my calls 2 years ago were suddenly saying, "Didn't you used to work at what was it? Saw something?" Saw something, indeed. By the end of the day, we had 4 new contracts signed and a dozen more leads lined up. Out in the parking lot, Nate slapped me on the back and said, "Bro, we're not a garage anymore." He was right. And Harper and Sons? They weren't even there. Not a booth, not a flyer, nothing. That night Mom left me a voicemail, her voice tired, almost breaking. "Your father's not well. Caleb's overwhelmed. Things aren't simple anymore. Maybe you could stop by, talk it through?" I played it twice. Then I hit delete. Not out of cruelty, not out of spite. I just wasn't theirs anymore. They'd spent years calling me just labor. Now they were finally seeing what happens when labor walks away and takes the backbone with it. 2 weeks after the expo, I thought maybe life was finally smoothing out. Redline was booked solid through next quarter. Clients lined up, new machines en route, and Nate was already talking about hiring a dispatcher. For once, it was quiet. Until Jeff texted me, "Yo, you need to see this." Attached was a PDF, a Redline fabrication proposal, except Caleb's name was on it. But it wasn't ours. It was a copy, word for word. Same structure, same pricing, same notes. The only difference was the logo swapped out at the top. Sawyer's and Sons Blackline Division. Blackline? Are you kidding me? I scrolled through page after page, shaking my head. It wasn't even clever. He lifted our exact rate sheet, scope of work, even our late fee clause. All he did was darken the header, swap in a new logo, and blast it out like he'd invented the thing. But he screwed up. He sent it to Crawford County. And guess who already had a signed contract with Crawford County? Me. The procurement office forwarded it straight over with the subject line. "Duplicate vendor? Just checking." Milo stared at the email and muttered, "Bro, is this illegal?" "Barely," I said, "but it's definitely stupid." Caleb hadn't just copied the business. He'd tried to snake my clients using my own contracts. It was pathetic, almost funny, until he crossed the line. He showed up at our Dayton shop. Middle of the day. No invite. I was walking a client through a calibration when he strolled in wearing loafers and a too-tight button-up, like he was filming a TikTok. "Yo," he called out. "Big bro, this your setup?" My client looked lost. I gave a quick nod. "Be right back." I walked over and said, "Get out." He spread his arms like we were in some holiday movie. "Hey, chill, man. Just wanted to see what the fuss was. Everyone's been talking about Redline. Figured I'd check it out." I kept my arms crossed. "You've seen enough. Leave." He scanned the place, smirking. "Nice gear, but it runs hot, huh? Could use AC." "Caleb." He raised his hands. All right. Look, Dad's losing it. The books are wrecked. We've got 2 lawsuits pending, an audit coming, and Mom's talking about selling equipment just to cover payroll." "Not my problem," I said. That's when he leaned in close. "I can make you an offer." I nearly laughed. "You want to hire me now?" "No," he said. "I want to merge." I blinked. "You want to merge Redline with Harper and Sons?" He nodded like he was cutting a billion-dollar deal. "Yeah. We absorb your contracts, consolidate resources. Family legacy stays intact." It was so dumb I almost respected the audacity. I shook my head. "Caleb, you put my name on a fake proposal." He waved it off. "Details. We're brothers." "Exactly," I said, "which is why I know you'll never change. You're not looking for a partner. You're looking for a parachute." His smile cracked. "This isn't going to be a forever win streak, man. You're going to need help." "No," I said calmly. "You need help. I just need to keep showing up." Then I turned back to my client and left him standing there. A minute later, I heard his car door slam, then the screech of tires peeling out like some teenager after a breakup. 2 days later, a legal notice hit my inbox. Cease and desist. Harper and Sons claiming Redline had stolen intellectual property from Blackline, their innovative fabrication division. I stared at it for a full minute before bursting out laughing. Milo looked over. "What now?" I tossed him the letter. He read it, blinked, and said, "Wait, they're suing us? For stealing our own work?" I nodded. He asked, "You want to make this public?" And I smiled. "Oh yes, I do." I didn't reply to the notice. Not directly. Instead, I called up a guy named Rich. He'd been in the game longer than I'd been alive, a supplier rep who still wore BOLO ties unironically and kept every contract filed in binders like it was 93. He also happened to be best friends with the procurement officer at Crawford County, the very account Caleb had tried to poach with my proposal. When I explained, Rich let out a wheezy laugh. "So let me get this straight. He rips off your design and then sues you for it." Yep. Give me 24 hours, he said. I got you. The next day, the county emailed me asking for permission to use Redline's original proposal as a public case study in vendor ethics at the statewide supplier summit. I sent back one word: approved. And just like that, what Caleb meant as a legal threat turned into free publicity for me and a public showcase of their failure. But it got even sweeter. At the summit, there was a panel titled Integrity in Contracting, When Innovation Gets Imitated. Guess whose proposal went up on the big screen? Redline's. And whose Blackline knockoff got picked apart line by line by an ethics consultant? Harper & Sons. And in the audience? My mom. She hadn't noticed me yet. I was sitting in the back, sipping awful hotel coffee, watching as a slide popped up with the title, Do Not Do This, the Blackline Copycat Proposal. It was the exact document Caleb had sent out, still carrying remnants of my portal info in the metadata. The consultant zoomed in on it like it was a crime scene breakdown. People gasped. Someone even muttered, "That's bold and stupid." Then they opened the floor for questions. A woman asked, what would have been the right thing for a company like that to do if their former employee became a competitor? The consultant didn't hesitate. They should have paid him what he was worth in the first place. I nearly stood up and clapped right there. After the panel, as folks shuffled out, Mom spotted me. She looked older, smaller, like the years had finally caught up. She walked over clutching her purse like it was her last line of defense. "Eli," she said softly, "I didn't know you were going to be here." I shrugged. Didn't plan on it. Just came to watch the show. She winced. "You humiliated your brother." I raised an eyebrow. "I did. You could have stopped that panel. You could have declined." "No," I said evenly. "Caleb humiliated himself. I just didn't cover for him this time." She opened her mouth, shut it, then tried again. "Your father's sick. Stress, blood pressure. He's hardly sleeping." For a second, that almost got me. Almost. But then I remembered all those meetings I was shut out of, the promotions handed past me, the years I spent grinding while Caleb played boss and polished loafers. So I said, "I hope he gets better." She blinked. "That's it. That's more than I got when I walked away," I said. Nobody checked on me then. She paused, then murmured, "I made lasagna." I smirked. "And I made a company. I think we're even." Then I turned and walked toward the breakout session for emerging vendors. As I sat down, I glanced at the name badge next to mine. Redline Fabrication, featured guest vendor. No footnotes. No son of label. Just me. Just earned. A week after the summit, a letter came in the mail. Not an email. Not a text. A real letter, like it was 1985. The handwriting was stiff, careful, like he'd started and stopped a few times. It was from Dad. It read, "You were right. I should have listened. We built something, but you kept it alive. Caleb isn't ready. I don't expect forgiveness, but if there's ever a way forward, I'd like to earn it." No signature. No return address. Just a quiet surrender. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like just labor. I folded the letter and tucked it away in the same drawer as the first Redline business card I ever printed. That weekend, we hosted our own open house. No fake suits. No phony smiles, just real clients, real work, and a long table full of Nate's mom's brownies. Halfway through, I noticed a familiar car parked across the street. Inside was Caleb. He never got out, just sat there, watching, like someone staring at the life they could have had, if they'd only respected the hands that built it. And me? I went back inside, because the thing about being called just labor is that labor builds empires. And I wasn't done building yet.